Hello, everyone. This is your host, Diedrich Davis. Coming up next is a new episode of Black Nerds Matter. On this show, we get real experiences, thoughts, and advice from different black professionals in the world of STEM. Stay tuned at WMNF Radio for more. Come for the science, stay for the nerds.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Black Nerds Matter. Today, we're thrilled to have Dr. Cam Mosley with us, a brilliant fisheries ecologist and National Science Foundation postdoctoral fellow at the University of Minnesota. Growing up along the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, Dr. Mosley's connection to the natural world began early, sparking a lifelong passion for understanding our environment. Their research dives deep into the ways human-environment interactions and climate change impact fish biology and ecology. Currently, Dr. Mosley is investigating how climate change could reshape species distributions in cold water fish habitats, work that's critical for understanding and protecting our ecosystems. With a Ph.D. from the University of Notre Dame and an undergraduate degree from Emory University, Dr. Mosley is not just a scientist, but a trailblazer in exploring the intersections of climate, biology, and community. Get ready to learn, be inspired, and dive into the incredible journey of Dr. Cam Mosley.
Thank you for the introduction.
No, of course. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good. So in Minnesota right now, correct?
Yes, I am a new St. Paul transplant, officially settled into the Twin Cities. We had snow yesterday, the day before yesterday, so I'm feeling very wintry. I'm ready for Christmas, even though we haven't had Thanksgiving. But uh, I like it.
Okay, I was gonna say I'm sure you don't get much snow in Mississippi.
No, I mean we had snow like a couple different times as kids, and that was like the best thing ever. You get flurries, right, and everything shut down. Now up here, we have to have significant snow for me to not go into the office. But I've slowly adapted because now if it's 50 outside, I'm like, oh, I could probably wear shorts. So phenotypic
Ooh,
plasticity.
okay. So I just talked a little bit about Mississippi. How was it growing up there? Especially, I know I mentioned earlier about you growing up on the Gulf Coast.
Yeah, really, I would say I had like a very explorative like childhood. My parents were very much so gung ho about education and the environment. And so a lot of times, especially during the summer, they tell us to go outside and play and then come back when the sun's about to go down. So I spent a lot of time just exploring nature, climbing trees with my cousins. And the beach, like the Gulf of Mexico, is about walking distance from my grandmother's house. So we also used to go down, play in the ocean, fish on the rivers. So I really enjoyed my time in southern Mississippi growing up.
Okay, that's wonderful. So how was your life at home? Have your parents been interested in you doing science, and how does that work?
Yeah, so I think since I, express different interests into activities like going to the zoo and aquarium. My parents like bought me a bunch of like books about sharks and rays. We would go to like the science museums for kids, so I could do a lot of hands-on things. And so they've always been very supportive of my scientific interests and tried to get me to, find any type of programming, even on TV. Like we would watch Animal Planet a lot, and they really encouraged that. But I think they also enjoyed it themselves. So we would do plenty of family fishing trips, sit out on the dock like all night. Me and my brother would be asleep, and they would be fishing still. So it was always encouraged. My parents were very like, focus on education. Don't worry about getting a job in high school. Focus on education. And so I just kind of went that path and I've been sticking to it. I've been enjoying it.
So you mentioned fishing trips. Is that how you got into marine science?
Yeah, for sure. I think it was what I say is the tipping point for me was a field trip in the 6th grade to the like Southeast NOAA Fisheries Lab that's there in Pascagoula where my grandmother lives. And we got to dissect sharks as well as walk through some turtle exclusion device shrimp nets that they had outside. And I was like, whoa, this is actually really, really cool. And in addition to that, I was like, these are these people's like jobs. Like they're scientists and they show people, you know, what's going on with the ecosystems in the shipyard. And I was like, I want to be them. I don't know how I'm going to get there, right now as a sixth grader, but I want to do that. Given that, like you said, like those fishing trips were very much so like our hobbies, and so once I figured out that I could do some science related to an ecosystem that I'm already connected to, like emotionally, I was like, yeah, that's how I want to get in it. And then when I went to Emory, since it's inland, I did some undergraduate work on some urban stream stuff, and I really was like, I love being outside in nature and doing science. And so from there I kind of picked a graduate program where I could continue to be outside in the environment, learning about different species. And so now I'm kind of, I would probably call myself more of a brackish researcher. I like to work with some folks who do some coastal stuff. Most of my PhD work is inland, and my postdoc is inland. But a lot of the methods for different fisheries analysis are the same across ecosystem types. So it works.
Okay, sweet. You just brought up Emory for a second. How was can you delve into your experience going to Emory as an undergraduate?
Yeah, sure. So I actually went to Emory's Oxford College for 2 years. It's kind of like an honors college a little bit. It's a smaller campus. I got my associates there, and then I went to the Atlanta campus my junior and senior years, and that was very like transformative to just me like learning about different scientific fields. Our we had a lot of different courses that really like engaged my mind to think bigger. I took a fisheries course, and we got to go to the Georgia coast and talk to people who were farming oysters and shrimpers and look at how things have changed through time. And it just taught me to like that I can do research and think about not only the ecosystem and the biological components, but the people part too. Like that they're not separate and that it's like together, and that there's multiple ways I can, navigate doing that in a career. So Emory was a good time.
Okay, thank you so much. No, thank you so much for sharing that. I've heard different from a lot of different people who have been on the show about horror stories from grad school, undergraduate, postdoc, all that kind of stuff. So how was your experience as a graduate student compared to your experience as an undergraduate student?
For sure. So my graduate degree was at the University of Notre Dame in the biological sciences department. So I went from an environmental science program to a more like broader biology department. So we had uh, a range of researchers, folks who do disease ecology. We had folks who do like animal behavior. We had aquatic ecologists and terrestrial folks, as well as like a whole nother side of the department that did like cancer and virology and things, which was actually really cool because there was a lot of different seminars where you could learn from a lot of different faculty and researchers who do things that are very different than what I do, but explain their research in a way that was understandable and kind of taught me a lot about just communicating science and learning from other subfields, just different ideas and innovation that I could bring into my own work. I got a chance to do a lot of field work for my graduate research, which I really, really love. I spent half of almost every year sampling lakes in upper Wisconsin at the University of Notre Dame's Environmental Research Center. And through those experiences, I also got a chance to like mentor undergraduates in independent research projects, as well as just a team of field technicians to collect samples for our lab. And I learned a lot more about the like aquatic and limnology side of the work that I do. So it really gave me a really good ecosystems approach to where I could think about all of the system components. And it also kind of started getting me more into interdisciplinary work. So a lot of our research collaborators for the projects that I was working on were researchers at different government agencies like Department of Natural Resources. And it was really cool to just see how like the work that I was doing was like very applied, and it could be something that different communities or like lake associations could implement to try to help foster health within their system. So like one of my projects we added coarse woody habitat, which is just like dead trees and other woody structures, to the shoreline of a lake to see how that, if it would provide substantial enough habitat to foster increased growth for some of our fish species. And then if it did, trying to figure out why the fish were growing. So if it was just from more access to food from that substrate, or if there was other effects, like they didn't have to move as much because now we created this really good habitat by them. And so since they weren't putting, body out, like energy allocation towards finding food, they would just grow more. So that was the cool project that I worked on, that I saw literally very applied. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources already has a program to add what we call fish sticks, the different trees to the lakes. They have a program that already does that. And so it was really cool to just see how we can use science to like directly inform management and, make our fish bigger and funner to, catch. Like that's part of the fun.
So how has that experience been for you, actually seeing the impact of your work in like the time you've been alive? Some people do research their entire lives and might not see the impact until way later on, but how's that been to be able to see, oh, the fish are getting bigger, oh, this is happening, so and so forth? I bet that's awesome.
Yeah. It's a little like mind blowing that, doing what I feel like as early career scientists, what feels sometimes like, oh, I've only done a couple of things. Seeing those big like impacts when you're actually on the lake and you catch a fish and it's like thick and they used to look like paper. I have one picture of a fish and he's just skinny. And then now all the fish we get out of there about, sizable. Their body condition is better. And I have stats to show that their body condition is better. It really just makes me feel like the work that we're doing as scientists is worth it. A lot of times, the way that conservation sciences are kind of explained in different spaces is very negative. Like we have climate change happening, we have all these different human impacts and mass extinctions. Sometimes it's very hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And whenever you have those small wins, like you see your populations, dynamics get better, or just, a population is healthier, or even just persisting through time, and maybe we predicted they weren't going to persist. A win is a win.
Absolutely. I mean, you're saying early career scientist. What am I, like a fetal career scientist? Because I haven't even I just finished my undergrad degree, and you're like early career. You have a PhD. After I feel like I'm way, way like at the beginning now. Like, have I even started yet? But
You're like a young of year. That's what we call our juvenile fish that are like it's their first summer. You're a yoy, a young of year. And it's really like the world's your
you
oyster. It's really just the beginning. It's hard to feel like that right now, but once we're, mid-career scientists, like in the next 20 years or so, we're gonna be like, oh yeah, we were babies.
I think it's so cool that you can see the impact, especially them getting bigger or smaller, depending on whatever thing you're working with. I would almost feel like I'm playing God or something, or I'm playing like The Sims or something, and I'm creating this stuff, turning the sliders up like on a video game, and now the fish are huge, the spawn rates are better. I bet that's just so cool. Like, I love seeing that kind of stuff because a lot of the work I do has been deep sea stuff and parasitology. So samples I'm getting are from a way long time ago, and I ever see the impact of my work, it's going to be in like 15, 20 years. Like, I mean, I can't just make someone give me a submarine to go down there and see it, or get an ROV and go down there. Man, being able to see that is so cool. And also, I've never met anyone who worked in freshwater and brackish systems. Most people I know are marine and all. Like, if it's not salt, they don't want to be involved. You know what I mean?
Well, the thing is, you'd be surprised, like especially in the upper Midwest, these Great Lakes are mini oceans. You have to have a huge vessel to go and trawl and sample properly, and it's almost identical, to what you do on the coast. So it's really cool to see the cross pollination of ideas at different meetings like ASLO, so Association of Scientists in Limnology and Oceanography, because that crosstalk is so important. And you also have oftentimes similar species, because species don't care about boundaries. some of the species don't care about salt even. You have salmon that come in to the freshwater, spawn, and then head back out to the ocean. So we gotta have that connection.
And it's so cool hearing about that. And so with that being said, I wonder what are some of your favorite fish that you've seen working or caught on your own? What are like your like top five fish?
Okay, top five fish. So a lot of the Midwestern lakes are pretty simple-ish systems. So we have a lot of glacial lakes up here where the glaciers retreated and they got stocked with a couple of what I call charismatic individuals. It's like largemouth bass. That's one of my favorite to catch just because I love a good fight. Something about that's what keeps bringing me back to fishing. I would say the like most grand catch that I've ever had sampling was when I was electrofishing. So we have a boat that sends out pulses, electric pulses into the water, and it just stuns the fish. And when they're stunned, we just pick them up and put them in a tank in the boat, and then we count them and then we put them back out. We
Whoa,
actually we actually shocked
that's cool as hell.
muskie. So I don't know if you know what a
Okay,
muskie is, but it's like a big pike,
okay.
big freshwater fish, long and tubular with teeth. And this fish was wanted to approach about half my body length almost. Yes, I'm not very tall, but it was a big fish. And just it got shocked and almost jumped into our net. And that was such a fun time. I I love having that experience, and it's something where I often describe fishing kind of like treasure hunting.
Hmm.
You're kind of like just feeling out for different things and you never know what you're going to get, but every time it's like a surprise, and that's the fun of it. I also trying to think like for saltwater wise, when I used to fish a lot with my family, I would catch things like flounder. One time I caught an eel. About freaked me out. I was like, is this a snake? What is this? And it was a freshwater eel. And like the
Wow.
brackish part. So that was really cool. Also gotten like some rays. They're cool to see, but like a little bit precarious trying to get off and get back into the water. But
Oh yeah. I've always hear about people saying they land array and it's like really hard to deal with.
you sit there and you go, oh, why did I do this? And then every once in a while you kind of get like I've gotten surprises like blue crabs and stuff, even on like rod and reel. Mind you, my family, like we would fish and crab simultaneously. So we had proper crab nets. So when I caught it, I was like, this is not right. What are you doing, buddy? Get off of here. So those are a handful of my favorite finds.
Okay, that's cool. I was just wondering if you did any deep sea fishing, stuff like that. I have buddies who go out in those big charter boats and they're out there, pulling in marlin and if they're not, they're on the other side of the boat throwing up, like it's a whole ordeal. I've so many people who either love being out there or dislike it. And for me, it's all like me, my grandfather, he's a huge, huge fisher. And he's the first person like one of the first people I caught fish with, like catching catfish in Arkansas, you know what I mean, on a little tiny speedboat. But yeah, and I'm wondering about just fishing in general because I'm not much of a fisherman. I'm a diver. I like to be down there and see what they're doing. How can someone like me who isn't huge into that? Because I feel like I'm sitting there and I'm waiting and I'm like, I want to just swim in there and look at them. How do I get into something like fishing? Or if I want to help to get somebody else who's like me into something like this?
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing, there's lots of different types of fishing, or fishing gears more so. So, fishing technology, it's crazy now. There's so much like sonar and like different like contraptions you can buy to kind of get a sneak peek in the water. I haven't done much like deep sea fishing. Usually when I go out on like further excursions, it's more so to like hang out in the sun, and just relax and swim. But I would say maybe, I mean, obviously, if you have a fishing guide, they can kind of show you the spots and increase your probability of catch. But I've started fly fishing in the last like year or two, and I found that to be pretty fun. When you fly fish, you kind of have to like flick your wrist, and it's like a a very long like thread and line that you're using to mimic literally a fly or a bug motion, because that's what a lot of fish eat. And something one about like just having to recast, it keeps you busy a lot more than kind of like bobber fishing. And also that slap, that snap when the fish hit the water, when the like right when that bug like gets there, unmatched. And I've caught like freshwater fish on flies too. So it's not like you need to, be in like a big river or anything. I would say that's very fun. The fish finders, like I said, you can put them on your bow and you can move around. You can kind of spot where fish are. That's one way if you want to guarantee someone getting a fish or two and having fun with that. I also think that sometimes just snorkeling is a good time. For some of my research, especially kind of seeing how the younger Younger fish respond to adding that wood, we would actually do snorkel surveys. So we would snorkel and then count bass. So you could fish with your eyes instead of doing rod and reel, and just swim around and record what you see. So that's also I think a fun way to go about it.
Okay, so I'm wondering, so I want to kind of transition into something new right here. I'm wondering, how is postdoc life? Like, I'm sure you have to balance doing all your work and then going fishing and having fun doing the things that you love on a daily basis, playing video games. I know that's something you like as well that we'll be talking about later. But how do you balance all that, and what is a day in the life like for you as a postdoctoral researcher?
Yeah, postdoc life. Oof. It's a transition. It's very different. As a National Science Foundation postdoc fellow, I get to dedicate like my whole time to doing research as well as doing activities to broaden the participation of underrepresented groups in postdoctoral positions in biology. So that's what the theme that my grant is under. And so most of the time I'm doing research. So either I'm going to a group lab meeting and we're talking about different ideas or different methods. And then I'm often meeting with collaborators, you know, talking through some ideas, making sure we're getting the correct data streams, sometimes talking through stats. And then a good chunk of my days right now is me in our studio. Me in our studio, just clicking and clicking and clicking. I work with Dr. Gretchen Hansen at the University of Minnesota, and we're like a applied fisheries systems lab. And we do a lot of statistical analysis to connect climate change topics to fish abundance, population distribution, thermal tolerances and preferences. So I've been doing a lot of data wrangling and then using some stable isotopes. So fish
Okay.
tissue samples, you can get chemical signatures that can indicate where they are on the food web, as well as their resource usage within the lake, be it nearshore, more terrestrial inputs, or the offshore pelagic, the deeper parts. And so right now, what I'm just doing is looking at all these lakes in Minnesota and kind of just seeing how the proportions of where these different fish species are on those different food web levels, how it varies. And then I'm going to add in this climate impacts and their thermal physiology to figure out if that is predictive of that.
Okay, that's really cool. I like hearing you talk about stable isotopes in particular because I have a paper in review right now where I'm doing stable isotope analysis and stomach content analysis, and just hearing how it's used in different systems is really cool because for what I'm using it for is deep sea, and it's just so important. And any of the other fish people on here, like, I'm so happy I have you because you're a fish person. A lot of the other scientists that I've been working or talking to on here are like coral, or just just regular, just ecologists in general, or they do kelp, different things like that. But I like fish. Like, I'm a fish dude. I like sharks, all that kind of stuff. So it's nice hearing about people using the same kind of methods I use in my work in a different system. And I didn't even know you guys did that kind of stuff, so that's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. For my whole like experiment that I did with the adding the wood, I also took diets. So I have a whole bunch of diet samples. We just more so did taxa and biomass. We didn't do any chemical composition work. I did take samples from the fish though. But it's been really cool to kind of develop that skill. I started to think about it and learn about it when I was getting ready to defend in my last semester of graduate school. But it's been really cool to be around a lot of people who know a lot about it and learn more about different tools that I can use from having that information. And so a lot of the postdoc time too is spent reading, trying new things out, learning from others, and collaborating, and then a little outreach sprinkled in there.
I have one big question for you, and I hope you have an answer for me because this one's serious. Why don't you like the ocean? Why are you just in the lakes and streams? Like, what, you don't like the saltwater fish? You have no love for the sharks and the rays and all that kind of stuff? Like, what's going on?
So I have a love for them, very much so.
Okay.
I have there's a project that someone's like side project that I'm assisting with to think about some more fisheries that are on the coast and how seagrass is influencing biodiversity of different
hmm
marine organisms. So what's on the side is getting there. All I'll tell people right now is wait for the research program, okay? And there will be some more marine elements. I love marine environments. I travel a lot to marine environments and spend time there. It's just that since I did the majority of my graduate work on lakes, I decided for my postdoc to stay in the same system, but learn more so different methods and approaches to examining fisheries. And then I hope to be able to take that and then scale it up in the future to where I can start thinking about climate and local environmental impacts on species distributions, period, globally. So I'm getting there. I'm just going to say, you know, to be continued.
Okay, I'll let it slide this time, but next time I talk to you, I better see some type of ocean thing going on because if we're gonna be working in black and marine science, I need some marine in your work, okay?
I'm working on it. It's cooking. It's cooking. That's where I started though. My
So
love
we
my love started in marine. And I always was like, oh, I'll be marine biologist, marine biologist. I'm like, I'm an aquatic ecologist. Sometimes I think about marine things. Sometimes I think about freshwater things.
okay, so your alter ego is a marine scientist.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a marine
Okay, so
ecologist inside a freshwater ecologist. It'll come out at one point.
okay. Okay. I like to hear that. That makes me feel better. So one of the things we've talked a bit, or not just a bit, we talked a lot about science, your career, your journey, and a lot about fishing. I'm really glad to hear about that because I just think it's so interesting. It's not something I do. I do the watching. I don't do the grabbing. But I want to hear some about your experience. And I know especially before you came in the interview, you were talking about wanting to share about being like Black, queer, non-binary person in science and how that's been an experience you've had in your life. I want to give you the floor to talk about that because I just want to hear your experience. We had a queer scientist on a few weeks ago, and I just love hearing these types of stories from people that are outside of a community I'm used to hearing about often.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate the space to like be able to share authentically. It's something to where fisheries is a white, male dominated field, period. Not unlike many academic spaces. And we have publications and studies have shown like not only is it very like homogeneous in the academic space, but also in governmental fisheries jobs. And so I want to think about where I'm working now and where I want to go to in the future. Oftentimes, I'm the only person in the room that has these lived experiences of being a Black, queer, non-binary individual. And so you have to work through those things like imposter syndrome. So feeling like you don't belong there because no one looks like you. But you have to deal with that as well as like having this burden of hyper visibility. So my Blackness is not something I can just turn off. And then to really be able to like bring my best self as a scientist and do the work I need to do, I need to be able to be me. So for me to kind of navigate being in fishery science, it's taken me, you know, a little extra effort that I think my white counterparts don't have to do to get that external community to make up for what I don't have internally a lot of times. So I'm in Black and Marine Science. I'm also a member of Black Women in Ecology, Evolution, and Marine Science. WEAMS, a lot of members are cross pollinated. uh, and in these spaces, like I can go to conferences and share with others and learn from others in a space where I don't have to have that extra burden about thinking about, are they understanding what I'm saying? Am I code switching enough? Like, am I like sometimes you also feel like you have to say a lot or prove you're worthy to be in the room, and like all of that extra stress and stuff I don't have to worry about in these other diverse spaces. And so it's been really helpful to me to find that and also find my allies when I can. Like my graduate school advisor, Dr. Stewart Jones, was really, really instrumental in making sure that I got through grad school like fairly happily. Like, yes, I was working hard and we all gotta work hard, but I tell people all the time, I had a good grad school experience. I love being at the field station. I was very much so supported funding wise and given a lot of like mentorship because I went straight from undergrad to PhD. So I had a lot of like really good
Wow.
mentorship about how to be a scientist, about writing, about just challenging myself with ideas in a way that like has really, I feel like, benefited me as a person, my personal development as well as my professional development. And so I try to tell people all the time, like, representation matters a whole lot. If you find yourself to be the only one, you are probably the only one in your little space, but there's someone just like you somewhere else, and find them and connect with them. And y'all lift each other up, you know? And then when we're here, then other folks, as they're coming up, can see us, and just the cycle can continue.
Okay. I really appreciate you sharing that. And that's crazy that you went from undergrad straight to PhD. I thought about doing that. And then I was filling out the NSF geography, like, the first semester of my senior year. And I was like, dude, hell no, I'm so tired. I'm so burnt out. If I go into that right now, I'm done. Like, I had a guest earlier who was talking about she got the GRP and was like, damn, I feel like I'm in handcuffs. I gotta go now. And she's like, yeah, it's good and all, but, you're just working through that. And so, with you mentioning being non-binary, I learned recently from a different guest what queer is and how it doesn't really have a direct definition. It can be a lot of different things. Can you explain to me what non-binary is and what that means to you and what like that experience is like? Because I don't know much about that.
Yeah, sure. So non-binary is referring to my gender identity. And so at least there's a lot of different terms under like the trans umbrella. Non-binary is under that. And what that really means is we're outside of the bubble or what people often consider to be the binary, which is, man and woman, and those are your two genders, and that's that. But folks who are trans and non-binary are outside of that. And so for me personally, what that means is that I am more so like in between. Like my gender identity is a mix of, you know, both. I don't really see myself as one or the other.
Hmm.
Some folks feel like they're like a whole nother gender. That's another thing. Like there's a lot of different um identities. As well in different cultures too. It shows up in different ways. Like there are two spirit folks, who have like in indigenous cultures that have like different identities outside of the Western binary, So there's also a lot of complexity there. But for me, queer has some more so to do with like my sexuality. So as a non-binary person, since I am not in one gender or the other, saying like that I'm, straight or not straight, it doesn't really work. It doesn't really work, that terminology anymore, because I'm outside of that. And so what I often just say is I'm queer, shabam. But as a non-binary person also, people that are trans non-binary have a range of pronouns. Personally, I prefer they, them. But if people use any pronouns, it's not a thing for me. But some folks, they are very particular. I just say, like, I'm Cam. I be navigating the world through Cam, not a male or female lens, just Cam.
Okay, that's really cool. I mean, I'm glad you talked about like the queer and non-binary part because I was literally gonna ask, do you have to be queer to be non-binary? Because I just don't know. I'm not aware of how this works. I mean, being a straight black man, I mean, the only way I could be further away from this kind of thing was if I was a straight white man. You know what I mean? So it's just a very different thing, and I love hearing different people's stories and their experiences being outside of the norm and the things that we see on TV or whatever all the time. So that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. And with that being said, I'm wondering, how has your identity influenced your perspective on science and conservation? Are there unique ways that you bring your whole self into research and advocacy that somebody that was part of the gender binary wouldn't be able to?
Yeah, for sure. I think in a lot of ways, you know, your lived experiences like just influence just how you experience the world in general. So, as someone also who oftentimes is like dressed more masculine presenting, sometimes my queerness is also something that is just kind of visible. And so, what I've had to do and sometimes, especially for things like field work and whatnot, take more thought and care and considerations about how I navigate the space for safety. And that's something that a cis counterpart might not have to do. Um, it's also something to where I think me having just, like I said, different lived experiences as a queer, non binary individual, where, I just have some ideas sometimes that pop up that my colleagues might not have. Like, because, you just go through life and different experiences. So if I'm like, yeah, when I was, you know, having to think about my healthcare and where I'm going to live and stuff and rights. I remember mentioning that to one of my colleagues, with the different political landscape that we're in. And they were like, "Oh yeah, like
Hmm.
I didn't even realize that." And so making sure when we're reaching out to recruiting people, right, that we tell them that about what resources are there, or if there's extra safety considerations that they need to take, being very transparent about that so that everyone, when they are navigating what positions to look into or what labs to be in, that they know these things. And there's a lot of different groups that have come up with different field safety things and, ways that you can show that you're a researcher in different spaces so that you can feel safer. And that is something that is also very relevant to just other people of color.
I like that you brought that up, especially how you could go do things in a different way. I remember my first time doing research outside of my home institution. I was working at Duke University, I believe my sophomore year of college. And we had a Zoom call before I went. And the like PI of the lab was talking about how differently the women that he had to mentor were approached and dealt with when they were working on boats alone versus the men or when they had men. And that was something that I had never really thought about. And they were saying, and then the women in his lab were saying, yeah, like dudes would try to get on our boats and be like, yeah, do you know what you're doing? Do you know how to drive a boat? Do you know how to back this up and all this other stuff? And I was like, well, I had never even thought about that because for me, do I get the whole a person coming up to you and be like, "What are you doing?" Being a black person? Yeah, I get that. But I never got the aspect of you don't know how to do that because you're so and so and so. Like you're a woman. You obviously don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to back this boat up. Da, 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 da. And that was crazy to me. And I've seen that throughout my entire time as a researcher, like even when I was working in California recently, some guy was talking to the women I was working with, and well, he was talking to me. He's like, "Oh, you letting these girls, letting these girls unhook this boat and all that stuff." And then I'm like, they're more qualified to do this than me. Like, what do you mean? And that's like a crazy thing that goes on.
Very much so. And I'm in the Midwest now. Our particular state is blue, but some of the surrounding places and places I've worked in the past, you know, you have a different socio-political climate, and just having to learning the kind of unwritten rules and skills to navigate, when you might be experiencing an interaction with someone in the public who isn't sure about like your existence exactly. Like I don't know how to put it, but right? Like questioning why you're there, questioning your, skill set or just everything. Like just learning how to navigate those combos is a skill that I've, worked on and had to learn in this situation, but it's not something that is necessarily able to be taught to a lot of people because their, supervisors or predecessors didn't have to experience that. So
Absolutely. I think one of the most interesting things about that is when people come up and just kind of ask you what you're doing. And I realize even with some people that I worked with, like other black people, like, oh, like they would be thinking immediately, oh, this person is trying to say we don't belong here and this and this and that. But then I realized a lot of the time when I was working with people or when people come up to me, they honestly just want to know what you're doing, like what kind of research you're doing and all that different stuff. I think it's so important to balance like to actually hear them out and see what's going on versus saying they're trying to say I don't belong here versus if they are, then try to do it. And I think that's so important to actually talk to these people and see and also know what climate you're in. Because I've had to talk to people and be like, hey, they're not doing anything on purpose. They're really just asking us. They're ready to get up in arms and no, we're supposed to be here. Da, da, da. I'm like, wait, like give it a second. Like he's just a nice old dude. He's just wondering what we're doing on the boat.
yeah, I would say like one of the other big benefits that I had during my graduate research was one of the lakes that I did an experiment on, one with the wood. We actually did it on a lake that was a part of this lake association and their
Hmm.
property. And they invited us in to do the study because, they wanted to work on their population and things. And through that experience, we had what we called like a jamboree every year where we would go fish with the members. I collect the fish, get biological information and tag them and put them back. And then we would take some of the fish out because they had a bit of a density dependence problem. So there's too many fish in the lake, not enough resources. And so we did a fish fry. And so
Wow.
some of the members would catch fish and we would keep some of those after we got the biological information and otoliths and things. We would fry the fish up and I would, give a little spiel with the DNR scientists and talk to them a bit about what we were doing, the benefits of just learning about, their lake system more. And I even made them creel sheets to fill out. So if they did take any fish from the lake, I had that information. And so through that collaboration, I learned just that, like, there's some folks that might not look like you, might not have the same politics you do, like not like didn't come from the same place or different ages, but we all have a lot of the similar values, right? We want to preserve the, fisheries as a resource for future generations to come. We want to have a good time when we go and fish and catch a big fish and be able to put it back and get a bigger one. Like we have those same goals. And so when you focus more on connecting with similar, it's so easy to build relationships with people. And it got to the point where, I would pull up to the lake in my field truck. They would drive by, honk and wave. People always come up to me, ask me what they're doing, what I'm doing. If people come by, they're like, "Did you catch anything today? What did you see?" I would send them photos and email updates. They would, invite me to, to the cabin to like have s'mores. Like super, super nice people that I know are very different from me, but we connected on those values, and it made the work easier or funner.
Absolutely, because I feel like people, especially people that look like us, you know what I mean, black and brown, we can almost ostracize ourselves before people can ostracize us. And we're like, we don't belong here. And then we're going to kind of push ourselves away before they get a chance to even do that. And some people can be so welcoming. And a story I really want to share with you, because you said you had a similar experience, was when I was in like kindergarten or when I was in elementary school, one of my best friends was a dude, like a white dude named Donovan. His parents, they mudded. They had like they had a Confederate flag, like all that stuff in their house, and we hung out all the time. He was one of my best friends. Like my mom trusted me at their house and all that. They never treated me as if I was black or whatever. Like there were people that were probably like Democrats or more liberal that treated me worse when I lived there in Pennsylvania than his family did. Like they treated me like I was one of their own, and that was something that always changed my thought about people who had different political values and things of me. Is that I really think that his family, people that he was with, they just didn't know no better. They didn't know that the like the flag and all that kind of stuff means what it means to us. And I'm sure like if I told him and let them know, that they would be like, we see. But it's just, I think having that conversation and taking that time, having that fish fry, going mudding with your, your redneck friend, I think it's just so important to build that sense of community and to see that at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to make it to the next day.
Yeah, and I grew up in Southern Mississippi. Used to interacting with just folks with just differences, and it's one of those things where, given that a lot of times some of these systems and structures we got no control over, but what we can control is our interactions with other people, and us doing the science. So when we can maximize that for positivity, I think folks should take the opportunity. And a lot of folks too, like, those interactions they have with you help build that emotional muscle and gain some of that capacity to be like, actually, that's weird. Maybe I should learn a little bit more about their life, and we're more alike than not alike. So getting some common ground.
Awesome. Thank you so much. One of the next things I want to ask was, can you share any highlights from your past research and what excites you about the current research you're doing as a postdoc? I know we talked a little bit about research and things before, but I really want to know what some of your favorite things you've seen and some of the work you're most proud of. And even if you want to share some of the challenges of doing the work you've done, because I'm sure plenty of people listening right now would love to hear from you about that.
Sure. So one of my favorite graduate school projects was a whole lake experiment that I did, again at the Notre Dame Environmental Research Center, looking at how fish behavior which I'm capturing behavior mechanisms, but I'm not directly measuring behavior, but how the probability of fish being captured is being altered by how much we fish. So the experiment was, we just fish, my technicians, bless them, fish like every day one summer in these two lakes that used to be one lake that have very similar largemouth bass populations. We fish every single day. And then one of the lakes, halfway through the summer, we fished it twice as much as the other lake. We wanted to see if we caught less fish or more fish. And a lot of folks have talked about this in the literature, and I had hypothesized that there might be some learning involved with encountering, lures and hooks again and again. So we had expected that, more we fished in that other lake, that our catch rates would go down because the fish are like learning to avoid that stimuli or something to that effect. But we actually saw the opposite effect. And so we saw more of a habituation to the angling gear. And so every time I give a talk about this, I show like a picture of Dory. She has that short-term memory loss.
Uh-huh.
Basically, the catch rates are about the same, or if anything, for some of those individuals, the more that you fish them, the more they bite. And so for them, they're interacting with the prey stimuli, even though we're predators. And so they're like, oh, more food, more food. I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep going. And there's no mortality because we're releasing them. So they're continuing to do that. We had some fish that we caught like 10 times, And so that was really interesting to see. And it was more so that the things that indicated, how the probability of recapture were more like seasonality. So throughout the season, their catch rates decrease just because their biological and ecology changes. Like, they're not spawning, so they're not running around as much or as aggressive guarding nests, as well as probably, these are more like things that we understand of probably some of the mechanisms for this, but also with seasonality, like, you just have decreases in resources. So you have all these like summer macro invert blooms, like mayflies, dragonflies. So the fish are getting all their stuff, and so by the end of the season, they're kind of chilling out, getting ready for winter, storing that energy. But that was a really fun project. I love a whole lake experiment. If you don't know, I was kind of crazy for doing like 3 whole lake experiments in a PhD, but it got done. It got done. That was very fun.
I'm glad that was fun for you. I mean, I can't even think of doing half a lake. I mean, doing three, that's crazy, but I'm glad you got it done. That's wonderful. I wanted to pivot into something new, and I really want to talk about you and your nerdiness. I mean, here at BNN, we celebrate being nerdy. I mean, hell, I'm here with a Boondock shirt on. I mean, so what makes you a nerd, and how do you bring that passion into your work and personal life?
Sure. So I mean, several things make me a nerd. And when I was in elementary school, I was in the chess club. I was in drama
Dork.
club in high school. I started, you know, collecting badges at a young age. Uh, as well as just like obviously I love science and everything. I'm also what I would call an avid gamer. I don't spend as much time as I used to because my capacity has changed. But I love sitting and playing Animal Crossing. That was my thing, especially during COVID. I would just sit there on my little island, fish a lot. I think I didn't finish the story mode for like a year just because I would just get on there, fish, and then you can also scuba dive now too. So,
Wow.
or it's more like snorkel, but like you can dive and like get sea stars, different anemones, like a whole bunch of stuff. So, spent a lot of time playing my Nintendo Switch. I've played Overcooked with like my brother and cousins. Sometimes it creates a little bit of drama.
Hmm.
Very much so. Stay in the kitchen. Your job is to do this. You're supposed to be chopping up stuff. You're supposed to be cleaning dishes. Some people want to run around too much. I like a lot of games like that. I'm also a big fan of like Mario and Sonic games. We still have my like household Wii in our house. And when my brother visited me a couple months ago, him and my best friend were playing Michael Jackson The Experience, and I like was dying. I was dying laughing. It was so funny.
If that's not the Black experience, I don't know what is.
It's that intersection. But I love like I started all the different systems. Like I had a Game Boy, then I had a DS, then we got the Wii, we had an Xbox. So I had the original Xbox, Xbox 360. We had the Connect when that was a thing. We don't even do stuff with that anymore. As well as just like playing like computer online games. I was that kid growing up as well. But over time, it's developed more. I do play some fishing games on my PlayStation and a mixture of things. Like I'm more so like an adventure person. So like Zelda, Breath of the Wild, like that kind of thing. Puzzles, a mixture of adventure, and then a handful of fishing simulation games. I probably have too many. But it's just when it's winter and I really can't go nowhere, I can scratch that itch.
So I was about to get on you for your choice of systems. I mean, you were saying Nintendo. I was like, okay, that's valid. I can always respect Nintendo because I have Switch, DS, Wii, all that stuff. But then you started getting into the Xboxes, and I was getting a bit triggered. I wasn't really happy about that. I don't know if you could see my face, but I was like, okay, like Connect. But you said PlayStation. Now we're talking. What kind of games you play on a PlayStation? Because I'm a PlayStation like lifer. My dad had the original one. I've had every single console except for the Vita.
My goodness. So what it was like, I think for the most part, a lot of our Christmases would be the next game system. So I would say the original Xbox was the best one. They did have some pretty good games on there. Like I had a Sonic collection. It was really good. And the thing is, my cousins, they had a PlayStation. So what we would do is we do a lot of cross pollinate. So PS2 is that system. I know it. It's that system.
Hmm.
I played a mixture of like Atari. I think I played Sly Cooper. I don't know if you ever played that one.
Ooh, that's my favorite. That's one of my favorite games ever. Me and one of my buddies go back and forth about what's your favorite Sly Cooper episode. What's your favorite game? Like we're huge into that. One of my best friends back home. Shout out Caleb. Yeah, that's our jam. It's Sly.
So like I get it. That one unmatched. And then we also played a lot of Guitar Hero on the PS2, I think too. Me and my family, that's one of our fun games to play. But on my PlayStation, I would say like a lot of my games, like I said, I've downloaded some to where I do like the fishing like online with different people. But I also have like Dragon Ball Z, I won't say Assassin's Creed, like those kind like Uncharted, those kind of ones where you run around.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily like a whole bunch of like fighting and shooting per se, but anytime I can explore around and do different things, I'm a fan.
Okay, I'm a huge Pokemon fan, and then even the online games. I used to play like Adventure Quest and all those other like
Dragon
MMOs and things.
Fable. I used to
Yeah,
play
yeah.
all those.
Yeah, MechQuest, Dragon Fable. I used to play all that stuff back, and then until you got to the point where you couldn't play anymore, you needed the premium account, and I was like, I don't even know what a credit card does. So I'm okay. I'm gonna play the free, like Wizard 101. You play through the beginning, the first hour with every power, and then you're done because you can't go any further without paying for it. But so I'm super into that, super into Pokemon. Like I play Pokemon online on this simulator called Pokemon Showdown. Really enjoy that. And you were talking about Breath of the Wild. I got into that, I think a couple of years ago when I bought my Switch, and then I got the Pokemon game Legends Arceus, and it was like Breath of the Wild, and you could run around and do everything in Pokemon. That was just the most cool experience. So for me, I love the adventure games, the RPGs, but I'm like a big fighting game nerd too. Like I play Tekken. Like I have a date with one of my buddies to go whoop his ass in Tekken like after this, you know what I mean? So it's just I love a good game, especially one where I can just see all these different power fantasies and do all this stuff that I couldn't do in real life.
Yeah. I would say, like, for, like, fighting stuff, like, Super Smash had a moment. I was like, "Man, this is just fun just to see, like, the crossovers, you know?"
Hmm.
And my brother, he was probably more of a gamer than me. He be putting me on different stuff, which is good too. And he's more so like for sure fighting game. He has like all the Naruto games, all the Dragon Ball Z games, and he's like, "You want to play this with me?" I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'll play." And then I'm like, "Oh man, I kind of like this," you know. And then I'll start playing more on my system. I had a moment, I had a Pokemon Go moment. I'm sure a lot of people did, but I also tried
Yeah,
to
yeah.
play on my phone a bit, play on that because one, it was fun, but I also like always made it a point during that time when I was like, I'm gonna buy a system of water. Let me go and get all the water Pokemon. Like that used to be my favorite thing, man. So yeah, I think between the video games, the science, and my other random fun extracurriculars, very well rounded nerd.
That's good. I mean, I think it's so important to be well rounded in those different aspects of yourself. And like personally, I love being outside, but I like being inside as well. And I feel like when you grew up somewhere cold or when you're in somewhere cold, you learn to appreciate that kind of stuff. Like for me, I was outside every day I could be when I lived in Pennsylvania, but then when that winter time hit, I was inside playing, Crash Bandicoot with my daddy and, like wrestling games with my little brother. So I think it's just really important to have that whole like nerdiness. You can have the whole thing. You can be the event. You can be picking up the bugs and stuff, but you can also be playing the games. I think because there's so many different avenues, different things that you can see and just experience. I just think that it's just a load of fun.
Yeah, for sure, most definitely. And like, I also have like random. I mean, like I'm an outdoorsy person, so I like to camp, kayak, boat time, and hike. I like cooking. It's another thing I like to do. Sometimes I can nerd out over food. Trust me, I love food.
What do you cook?
Um, I've been cooking a lot of like pastas lately. A lot of pasta, a lot of like soup. Gumbo is a staple in my household. So definitely we're making gumbo for Christmas and I need to sit and make sure I'm learning properly. But I usually like love cooking like fish. I mean, it's not that surprising. But some baked salmon and some like
Oh yeah.
wild rice and some roasted veggies. That sounds like a really good meal to me. I can cook mean steak too. Surf and turf time. I try to also like expand, like I got into making more breads and things. So I'm always down to learn something new. I tell everybody it's like I'll try anything once, like I love getting new recipes and doing something different.
Okay, that's cool. One of my favorite things, this is something that I've been making for years now, and anyone that knows me well knows I love it, is fried rice. It's like my favorite thing, chicken teriyaki fried rice, because I don't eat seafood like that. Like I like fish, but like shrimp, crabs, all that kind of stuff, not my jam. And I don't really eat red meat. So I just been loving chicken fried rice. It's like my favorite thing. I make like a whole bowl, and it'll be like even for my house, I'll make 5 days worth of fried rice for everyone. We're just eating it all the time. And it's so good. Like this teriyaki sauce from P.F. Chang's one of my favorites. And then as well as that, pancakes. I mean, pretty much for me, I only know how to make things I love. So anytime I'm on my own and living on my own, it's just me making my favorite foods all the time. And I just think it's so funny because my mom the same way. She's like, I'm not a big chef, whatever. The things that we make are things I like to eat, so I'm not gonna be making Brussels sprouts and all these other kind of things. You know what I mean?
No, I felt that so much. Like my brother, he got me a wok for Christmas, like 2 Christmases ago, I think. And I've recently put my mom on the tofu, and so I do a lot of tofu fried rice. And it's good. It's just so good. And I just fry an egg, put it on top. It hit every single time. Like there's certain things that I'm like, I can't believe that I haven't been eating this forever. Like the way I like it.
Okay. So I got one last question for you. I really appreciated having your time here, but I want to see what's your plans in the future. What are some of your goals for the next phase of your career? And are there any specific projects or areas of conservation you'd like to tackle in the future? I mean, anything. It could be as small as I'm going to get lunch after we finish this call. I just anything. I want to see what your future's looking like.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have I'm excited to see like what I learn from my postdoctoral research projects, how, climate change and warming waters might change future species distributions in lakes up here, maybe where there's no longer going to be thermal habitat for cold and cool water species. So I'm excited to work on that and learn more statistical tools. But further down the line, I I want to get that adult big person job at some point. It'd be really cool to have my like have my own research program, or even like lead some type of research group within an agency to just learn more about aquatic ecology and how like different water resources are changing, and how, what management levers we might be able to leverage to be able to mitigate some of these climate impacts. So I love doing applied ecological work, and I hope to keep doing that in the future, be it in freshwater or marine or both systems. But I'm definitely also
Marine.
marine. I know you're gonna say it. But I'm, also hoping in the future to do more collaborations with folks that work in different regions and ecosystem types so that we can really get a holistic look about what's really happening in all these systems. I think we have a lot of really, like, every time I open up, different social media or look at new papers coming out, everybody is working really hard and we're learning a whole lot of things. And now it's really like doing that synthesis and putting these different ideas and methods together so we can get a really good picture on the landscape, what's going to happen, and we can react fast because the climate is not slowing down. Those changes are not slowing down. And so we just got to keep it moving, keep it moving.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate having your time. I love seeing people like you, especially people wearing, a cute little fish sweater like the one you got on. It's awesome just seeing the different faces in science, whether, queer, non-binary, black, just all these different identities. I love seeing that in these spaces, and I think it makes it so much better because when I get to share this kind of stuff with people that look like me and are doing similar things to me, it's just so much more fun. So thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat more. BIMS week. We're going to get some more ideas going.
Absolutely. So, all right, everyone, that was Dr. Cam Mosley. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and like and comment on the show on Spotify. That helps. That's a good way you can support the channel for free. It'll help me do this one day as a job and make some money off of it. So, thanks again, everyone. Black Nerds Matter out.
Thank you all for tuning into another episode of Black Nerds Matter. None of this is possible without you, our listeners. A special thank goes out to our music team. On guitar is Graham Hempstead, who can be found with his name on any of your favorite streaming platforms, and our sound engineer, Brian, who can be found on TikTok at brian.tyler.music. Thanks everyone for listening.